Okay, can everybody hear me? I'm not sure if if this trick worked right here. Welcome. My name is Liz Lark Riley. I am the managing director at Rockledge Gardens, and I am thrilled to welcome some exciting guests here in our community who are doing incredible work to make Brevard more beautiful and keep Brevard as beautiful as possible. Welcome to Sally Scalera from the University of Florida IFAS Extension Office, Caity Savoia from the Marine Resources Council, and Scott Herber, head of the Horticulture Program at Eastern Florida State College. Thank you all so much for being here. Welcome. So we are here to discuss environmentally minded planting. And my entire life, this has been something that has been important to me. A sustainable planet, a place that my 6-year-old, when he grows up, can, just marvel at the beauty that I can see as well. And I'm so excited to dive into this topic. So the way that this is going to work is we will have each of these panelists talk a little bit about the work that they're doing, the work that their organizations do. I have some questions for each of them, but I'd also like to hear from the participants. I'd love to learn what we can do in our homes, in our communities to keep the environment in mind and continue to sustain the beauty of Rockledge, of Brevard County, of this beautiful place in Central Florida that we call home. This is the first time I have ever hosted a Zoom panel, so forgive me as I kind of figure this out. My event director, who does this often, gave me some tips, but of course everything is flying out the window as I try and remember all the things that I'm supposed to do. So I'm going to set it up so that our panelists can share their screens if they would like to. We're gonna, there we go. I think this is what I want to do. The speaker is the one that we are seeing at any given time. And I am going to go ahead and start with Caity Savoia from the Marine Resources Council. Caity, thank you for being here.
Hi, Liz. Thank you for hosting this. This is a great idea. So my name is Caity Savoia. I work for a small nonprofit, small but mighty nonprofit in Palm Bay, Florida, called Marine Resources Council. So we're a little south of Rockledge Gardens, but in Brevard County, and we actually focus lagoon-wide on restoring and protecting the Indian River Lagoon, which crosses multiple counties, not just Brevard County. So our mission is huge. We're just here trying to protect and encourage people to, adopt the most friendly behaviors towards the lagoon as possible. Many of us don't even realize a lot of the things that individuals are doing to harm the lagoon, let alone just the population in general. So the MRC is here to, work on education. We also have a restoration component and science. We do a lot of citizen science too. And I'm the director of science and restoration. So a lot of what I do is, working hands-on with the public, a lot of times with mangroves. We run a mangrove nursery, so we like to provide mangroves, which are really important species for the lagoon, and for us to protect our properties and our community from storms and storm surge. I think I'll have an opportunity to talk more about that because I could talk all day about mangroves and shorelines. But so if anybody included in here isn't aware of MRC and what we do, it's a great way to get involved. We have rain barrel workshops and mangrove workshops, and happy to be here today to talk more about it.
Thank you so much, Katie. I just put the link to Marine Resources Council's website, savetheirl.org. Most of you, I'm sure, know that IRL stands for the Indian River Lagoon, and we're so grateful for your efforts to continue to improve it for this community. Moving on to Sally Scalera from the Extension Service. Sally, tell us all about you and what you do.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Sally Scalera, and I'm with IFAS Extension, Brevard County. And so my area is urban horticulture. I also train the master gardeners. So I basically do classes on how to grow plants. Well, I even help people how to kill plants. And so pest control. Yes, we have those people that have invasives, right? So my main classes that I do every year, master gardener class is typically January through March. And I just got that class done this year before COVID hit, so that was pretty good timing. I do another class April and May on Florida-friendly landscaping, and then I also do a class the last 2 weeks in July and the first 2 weeks in August on Be Healthy, Grow Your Own Food. And then I do articles in the Florida Today and get lots of emails. So that's, that's everything in a nutshell.
All right, I'm also going to be putting the Extension Service website into the chat there. We at Rockledge Gardens rely on the Extension Service and their excellent research and information pretty heavily. And we, if we have a question about the invasiveness of a species, about growing patterns, IFAS is always our go-to for where are we going to find the best, most specific information in this county. So if you're getting your information from us at Rockledge Gardens through blogs and videos and things like that, we do a lot of research with IFAS because we love you guys. Okay, now moving on to Scott Herbert. He is the head of the newly formed Horticulture Associate's degree at Eastern Florida State College. He also moonlights as a coastal restoration consultant. Scott, tell us about the work that you do and the work that you're doing with your students.
Thanks, Liz. Hi, everybody. Scott Herbert here. I'm a professor at Eastern Florida State College, and I'm also a chair of the sciences. I did write the horticulture program. So let's talk about the college first, and then I'll discuss my side work that I do. The horticulture program, well, first of all, Eastern Florida State College, although it is an educational institution, people don't realize that we are also a research institution, too. We do have a whole undergraduate research program there, which is incorporated within our horticulture program. Now, the new horticulture program that's been created has two major tracks, which is the landscape track and the horticulture track. And then we've created recently, which are called college credit certificates. We have 3 levels for that, which is specialist, professional, technician. And the nice part about those is that, let's say you don't want to take the formal degree, but you want to learn a little bit about horticulture. Well, you can take these extra courses and earn a certificate in the process. The program does follow best management practices, and we incorporate that into our program. And what many people don't know is that we actually have an agreement with Rockledge Gardens that some of our courses are actually taught at the gardens. So the students get the hands-on right there. They're able to work with professionals. They get to see all kinds of pathogens, growing processes. And one of my students in my greenhouse course is actually interning right now at Rockledge Gardens, and they're building a greenhouse right across the street. So a lot of hands-on with the program. And it's actually, if you ever have a chance, please contact me. I'll be happy to tell you all about it. Our site is already put up. You can peruse through that. And again, you don't have to just go into the degree to take courses and learn about it also, which is wonderful. And then I know, Liz, you mentioned what I do. I do environmental consulting. I've been doing that since 2003, and a lot of restoration mitigation projects like that, which I actually take my students from the horticulture program and incorporate it into the professional world that way. And that's what I do as a professor, and we try to do that across the board at the college. So that's the program in brief. So thank you, and I'm looking way forward to answering everybody's questions. I get excited about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, all of you. So we do have the chat open, so anybody can put your questions into the chat. In the meantime, I am going to get you started with some questions that that I have prepared. These are things that I'm super excited to talk about and learn about. So we'll go one by one. Scott, you can go first this time since you went last before. What I want to talk about is planting. What should people in our community keep in mind when it comes to selecting plants for their landscape from the lens of being the most sustainable community we can be? What do you want people to keep in mind?
Thanks, Liz. Well, here's the thing is that when it comes to sustainable planting, and this is what I've seen for trends over many years, no matter what it is, and I've been in Florida for a very long time, not to try and age myself, but yeah, coming on probably 21 years or plus. What I found is that people migrate here from all over the country, and they're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole when it comes to planting. They want to have what they had up north, or were on the West Coast, or wherever they come from. They want that look, but it doesn't fit Florida. So when it comes to sustainable planting, I always promote, make sure you plant according to the zone you're in and what can happen. Now, I practice this. Every house I've ever lived in, I've shut my sprinkler system off. I never use my sprinkler system. So what I do though is, for instance, I planted a couple of years ago when I moved to this house recently, drought tolerant grasses. I put that in specifically, and it took 2 years for it to establish. But guess what? I have never used my sprinkler system, and I have a lush green grass. It's all about planting properly. And and sometimes what I also recommend for people too is, I know there's a lot of beautiful Florida plants that you can put in, and a lot of them are environmentally friendly and they drive things. But the other thing too is that, why not also, and I'm a big proponent of this, is edible landscaping. You can create a beautiful garden that you can also benefit from also. And then you don't really need all these fertilizers and all this added things. There isn't. If you just plant smart, and if everybody did this, we would not have any of these issues of pollution runoff, or at least when it comes to nutrient runoff into the lagoon and other areas. But that's just me. But I practice what I preach. So.
Do you have an all-time favorite native edible that is in your yard? What's your very favorite, if you could recommend something to someone?
Well, I got to think about that. In my yard, I don't have at the moment, but I do have a tendency when I'm out in the field, I do like to go into some of the, if you go on to some of these areas where you have like, was it wild raspberries that grow out there? And I'll even eat some of the grapes that grow out that way also. As for myself, for planting right now, I'm not planting that much I actually don't have any native edibles at the moment, but yeah, I do like to go wander through the woods and pick stuff.
I heard recently that blue porterweed, which is really beautiful, that the flowers actually taste like mushrooms, which I haven't tested, cool. But somebody said that and I Googled it and apparently it's a thing. So, and porterweed's beautiful. So I would recommend that one if you're looking for a
that's good
native edible.
And I understand it's not native, but I know you can eat hibiscus flowers too. So even though they're not considered native. I see there's
we have a question from Elizabeth, who's joined us. She says, "Hi, Scott. Could you recommend a drought-tolerant grass for this area?"
Yeah, I have to. I'll look up the one I use, and I believe it was a combination of an Argentinian and not
Bahia.
Bahia. Yeah, it's an Argentinian Bahia blend. Thank you. I was going to say Bahamian, but that was right. So it's an Argentinian Bahia blend. And I think Rockledge Gardens carries it, and if not, they can get it.
We don't carry sod at all, actually.
No, don't sod.
No sod at all.
No, Liz, you don't sod. You seed it.
Oh, okay. We don't. I don't think that we really carry a lot of grass seed either.
Okay. Now, before I shop for you guys, it was when I first moved here. I got mine at Home Depot, and it was a pretty big bucket. And the key is that you don't want to sod it; you want to seed it. because sometimes when you sod it, you're going to have to water it and water it and water it and water it. And you don't want to do that. You want to seed it and let it establish itself naturally under the conditions and where it's at. That's why it's the same thing. And Katie, not to cut and cross into the mangroves, but like mangroves, a perfect example. It's very difficult to take a propagule after it's grown in one salinity and transfer it to another. But if you start it off as a propagule in the proper conditions, it will modify to what it needs to do. It's the same thing with the drought tolerant grasses. You got to do it as a seed. And you have to, and for Elizabeth, for your question, you must have patience. It takes about 1 year to 2 years for it to establish correctly. But once it does, don't worry about it during the drought time. It'll turn brown. And as soon as the rains come, it pops green right away. So it'll be fine. It's not dying off. It's going into a dormancy.
Thank you, Scott. On to Sally. Sally, can you talk about what you'd like for people to keep in mind when selecting plants with the lens of having a sustainable, beautiful Brevard?
Yes, thank you for asking that very important question, because one of the good points of COVID, believe it or not, there's a good point, was I was able to watch a webinar in March. It was by the Florida Wildflower Foundation. They had Doug Tolomei talk, and I hadn't heard Doug before, and so I listened to his whole thing and I was blown away. So the idea in a nutshell is we don't have enough insects to support the terrestrial food webs to keep all of us alive. And it's important that we go ahead and garden for caterpillars, and that's not just butterflies, that's also moths, as well as support the specialist bees, which are our native bees, which keep all of our native plants seeding and such. So after hearing Doug talk about that, I have been on a big research project to look for the keystone species that are native to Brevard, as well as the plants that support the specialist bees. And Doug had said that if all of us go ahead and reduce our lawns by 50%, and if people want to do more, that would be great, but at least 50%, and we plant as many keystone species and the specialist bee plants as possible, we can take place of the wild areas that have been impaired by, first of all of the development, and then we also have the invasive plants. So with Brazilian pepper being the poster child of that one. So it ruins even the wild areas. So I am just about to get done with my new handout that will have all of the trees, shrubs, flowers, and then the specialist plants. And I have it broken down into the water requirements. So the dry, well draining soil ones will be separate from the wet and moist, because I know in my yard, I have no wet and moist. I can only get ones that can handle dry. So if anyone wants a copy of that when it's done, I'd be glad to share it. But I've always liked natives, but I never realized how important natives were, because they support our native insects, and that's what we need to do. So anyway, that is my big thing now, because I realized that, you know, after hearing Doug talk, I realized that my yard is a food desert. Like, I have very little that is supporting any of the good guys that we need to. Not that it's 100% nothing, but still. And one of the things that I wanted to do is get some shrub hedges in for the birds, because I have no cover now for them. So anyway, I learned a lot from that.
Excellent. Any follow-up for Donna? So we have a question from Stephanie. She says, I would love to know more about these keystone species and specialty plants. How can I obtain your list? Okay, if you guys want to email me, you can email me at sasc@ufl.edu. I'm going to be explaining, I'll even have a link in there to Doug's talk so that people can watch the whole thing. But keystone species are essentially the ones, 5% of our native plants provide 75% of the food. So there's a number of trees and shrubs, and then even flowers. Though some of the ones they called flowers, I thought were really more like a shrub growth. And then we have one grass, silk grass, which actually has a nice, pretty yellow flower. So when I hear silk grass, I just think of it looking like a grass, but it's actually flowering. And so, yeah, so I would have everything there, and you could just see, and I've been trying to find out where we could find them and stuff like that too. So. Very cool. Scott has a question for Sally.
Sally, yeah, my bad. Sally, the question I had for you too, and this came up with the native planting, and since you're really ingrained in this when it comes to code and regulations, I understand a lot of like Brevard County and many of the municipalities have a code on how high your grasses can grow. But if you're planting native, doesn't that supersede that rule?
Yeah, so I think the thing is, if you're looking at a clump grass, which like mully grass is and things like that, then that wouldn't be in that. And I have been called to different cases. I know one time Melbourne code enforcement asked me to come meet at a yard where it was a native landscape. Sharon Dolan even did the design. And so we met there and stuff. And, you know, basically I was telling the code enforcement people that if you have bare ground, that's pretty much a sign that nobody's doing any kind of maintenance. So even having mulch around areas is helpful. But if you're talking about a lawn that gets really tall, that would get somebody in trouble. But clump grasses and things like that, like, you know, aesthetically placed around the landscape wouldn't necessarily get someone in trouble.
Good, yeah, because I've seen where a lot of people do like native butterfly gardens, and you have to let them grow to let the flowers pop, but then people will report it saying, oh, they're letting their grass grow, but it's native. So I think that's allowed.
Well, and that's the other thing, because a lot of times when people move down here, they want everything to look like Disney.
Mm-hmm.
And so they do perceive a native landscape as messy or whatever. And so I have had situations where homeowners have called me because they're in an HOA and they're getting things like that. So, and the sad thing is, and it's true, all of our landscape designs are subjective, just like our fashion and everything else. So, but the Senate Bill 2080 is supposed to keep it so that homeowner associations have to compromise with homeowners. Like they can't say you can't do Florida friendly. So sometimes it's just a matter of, and it may just be as simple as the homeowner trimming some of the stuff so it doesn't look, and I'm thinking not necessarily at clump grasses, because clump grasses, they look like a clump grass and so they look fine. But sometimes people think that the natives look, you know, wild.
I know, yeah.
But that's okay a lot of times. So yeah.
Cool.
It gets difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sally. Katie, same question to you. What do you want people to keep in mind when they are selecting plants? What are some of your favorites? And what's kind of your MO with plant selection?
Yeah, so great question. And I feel like Scott and Sally both grabbed the top two, you know, low-lying fruit of, you know, making sure that you're, you know, right place, right plant, right place. There's some great resources for that. I think Florida Native Plant Society website actually talks a lot about that. So anybody that wants to kind of consider that when planting, and it's really important, you know, you could really set yourself up for failure. You know, if you're putting a round peg in a square hole or whatever Scott said, I agree with that completely. I feel like a lot of times people really need to kind of question, you know, the status quos. I feel like so much of lagoon health, and if I could bring it full circle, you know, the whole reason we're talking about this is not just to set yourself up for success in your own garden, but also thinking of the behaviors that you could implement in your landscape that can make a difference for our lagoon, which is really what I feel like today is about, is really trying to adopt some more lagoon friendly practices. And I think that questioning the status quo, you know, I talk about this a lot. I feel like I've talked about it in different presentations where I feel like we've learned a lot about how we've developed and different behavior patterns that we've adopted. And now we're kind of seeing the collapse of so many different coastal ecosystems. And, you know, we know why. You know, there's eutrophication as the overabundance of nutrients. We've basically, you know, thrown our system out of whack. And it's up to all of us to do what we can, do our part to try to reverse that imbalance. And I think that not irrigating, like Scott mentioned, I know that kind of like blows some people's minds. Like, you know, as a society, we've just like accepted the fact that we have a green yard and we water it. And, you know, I really hope that people reconsider that, you know, they kind of question whether that really is something that satisfies us, and whether it's worth you know, what it does to our lagoon, because one of the top reasons our lagoon is struggling so much right now is stormwater pollution. And there's a great reference I'd like to drop for everybody too. I'm going to put it in here. The Lagoon Loyal program is sponsored by lagoonloyal.com. Lagoon Loyal is sponsored by Brevard County, and it really does a great job of helping the person on the website, the user. I think you set up like an account to kind of walk through different ideas, different behavior changes that you could implement, whether it's just like reading an article, buying a rain barrel, planting native, you know, there's all these different like behavioral strategies that Lagoon Loyal pushes that actually offers monetary incentives to people. So anybody interested in making some money and also, you know, improving the health of the lagoon, that's where I would go. But so in my own yard, the individual practices that I've adopted, I purchased a home recently, and I was really excited that that allowed me to really express myself in my yard, because everywhere I've ever rented, I didn't really invest too much in it, but I've been killing grass left and right. It's very satisfying. I have so much less yard to mow. So I recently mulched like a huge area and built a fire pit. So it's great because it's expanded my outdoor living area. I've also just been trying to plant as many native species. I really liked what Sally had to say about kind of keeping the insects in mind, and kind of that kind of goes back to what I was saying about restoring the balance. You know, I mean, we've just completely thrown everything out of whack, and I feel like the little things that we can do to really focus on trying to restore some balance is just, you know, you can't overlook the value of that. And then I also have a rain barrel, and we have them for sale at MRC. And Cocoa, the city of Cocoa and the city of Melbourne both have rebate programs that can also offer financial incentive for getting a rain barrel. And they're pretty amazing. I mean, I didn't even connect it to my gutter. One of the misconceptions of people is that, you know, I talk to people all the time that are like, well, I don't have a gutter, you know, and I don't either at my house, but I still put one just right under the roof, and it's full year round. So, I mean, it's pretty fascinating. And that's a direct stormwater prevention tool. The other one big fact that I just learned, because I sent everybody at my organization, and by everybody I mean all 4 people that works there, you know, our small intimate staff, you know, I asked them for recommendations on you know, landscaping, like friendly landscaping tips, just trying to think outside of my own box. And one of the things that was told to me, the facts, is that evergreen tree canopy is actually the most efficient stormwater tool that we have available. So planting evergreen trees is arguably the most effective tool you can adopt in your yard for actually absorbing rain, because the tree canopy just absorbs so much.
That is fascinating. So when you say evergreen, obviously here in Florida, we have more things that are evergreen than what I think most people typically think of when they hear the term evergreen. You know, I think most people, I mean, I did not grow up in Florida, so when I hear evergreen, I think Christmas trees, you know, pines, conifers. So can you expand a little bit about what you mean by evergreen, and specifically how that helps to absorb stormwater?
Yeah, so I mean, if like a tree that's going to lose its leaves, you know, at some point in the year, it's just not going to absorb as, they kind of go into like a state of dormancy, right? So they're probably not absorbing as much as a tree that's, you know, just absorbing water year round. So I think that was the tool. I think Sally wants to add to this, and I would love that.
Well, the other thing too is that trees that have a canopy, so the evergreens like the oaks and the magnolias and things like that, even in the winter, if you guys have ever gone home after it's rained and you think, oh, I got rain, when I go under an oak in my neighborhood on my road, if it's not wet on the road, it didn't give me enough rain. So they actually intercept the raindrops and stuff.
Right.
So that is really, really good. But I actually know of something that's even better.
Please share.
I think it'll come up though in some of the other questions.
Oh, we can't wait, Sally. You have to give it to us.
But Liz, you might have already heard, because I've been talking about getting the biology back in the soil again.
Yes.
So that's the big thing, because if we can go ahead and establish the soil food web around our plants. So, Katie, we're talking about the stormwater runoff. We also have it through our ground. So if we have sandy soil, even our yard isn't helping. The other big thing that's really harmful is the use of synthetic fertilizers. So, and if we inoculate our plants, and that's the big thing, because, it sounds really difficult, but if you're planting something new, I go ahead and use a granular mycorrhizal mix in the planting hole. And then for any established plant, and even after I plant it, I use a liquid product, which is, you guys, Liz, sell Kangaroo Roots by Bush Doctor. There's also a microbe brew, and they have like 35 species of bacteria, endo and ectomycorrhizae. And so all you have to do is put it around the roots of a plant that's already living, and the root exudates will attract them, and then you'll get it. So then you don't have to fertilize, you don't have to water once it builds up enough organic matter. So I really think if we could get enough of the green spaces in Brevard County to get off of synthetic fertilizer and to let biology take care of it, which is what happens in natural areas, the Indian River Lagoon will be so much better off. But, until that happens, I don't see any major changes happening.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Sally, because totally when I was on my, soapbox about questioning our status quos, and I mentioned, not irrigating, and that just blows people's minds. Same thing with fertilizing, and they go hand in hand, as soon as, it's just one of those things that I just think we all should be questioning, whether we really should be using fertilizers and irrigation in our yard.
Well, and the thing is too, is, if you look at a synthetic fertilizer, it's a salt, so it's made to dissolve. So we are essentially growing all of our plants in our yard hydroponically. And if the nutrients get past the root system, the only place they're going to end up is groundwater. Right. And the only two basins we have in Brevard County is Indian River Lagoon or St. Johns River, and both of them are impaired. So, it's like we have to do something different. Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, Sally. I got a question for you then, and this is maybe, I don't know if it's been studied or not, but is it possible that, for instance, say Rockledge Gardens pre-inoculates the plants prior to sale, and will that inoculate follow with the planting, so that way people at home don't have to then add it? They can just take it with the plant and stick it in the ground.
Yes, as long as the plant was watered well enough while it was, because the one thing, and even that wouldn't be as harmful, if we have a disturbance of either synthetic fertilizers or pesticides, tilling and stuff like that, or, those things would kill any established microbes. So if they don't use any synthetic fertilizers and things like that after, it should be fine. A flood can move in too fast and kill the microbes, but a drought, they actually will go ahead and protect themselves. So that's not even as bad. But yes, you can inoculate it. That's what we want to do here at our garden, is inoculate the plants, so then people already have it with them. And yeah.
Sally, for some of our participants here, can you describe what you mean by inoculation for the layman?
Yes. So if you have any plant in your landscape that's already growing that you want to take care of, and this is one thing that I will say in defense of St. Augustine grass, it's not evil. It's the way we've been caring for it. It's one of those things, believe it or not, St. Augustine is actually a native, but it's usually growing in pine flatwoods with moister soil, grows higher and grows in dappled shade. So my thing is, if we go ahead and we inoculate it, because University of Florida actually found that St. Augustine grass has a relationship with Glomus mycorrhizae. And all of even our vegetable plants, anyone who wants to grow corn should be inoculating with mycorrhizae, because they have a relationship with 85% of the mycorrhizae out there. And I know they're still figuring out all these things anyway, but all you have to do for plants that are already established is buy a liquid inoculant like Bush Doctor, Kangaroo Roots, or Microbe Brew. You mix it in water and you pour it around the roots. That's all you have to do, because then the spores and all of that go down. They can tell that the exudates are there. They wake up, they start to multiply, and then they take off. And as long as you don't ruin anything, they're going to be doing better and better and better. And if fertilizer is needed, we can use organic. Mm-hmm. Organic is a food source for them, and a lot of the organics even have more microbes. And then when it comes to pest control, I look for an active ingredient that's another microbe, because if it's possible, why not add something that will take care of the ants in your, ground outside your house or whatever. But not every insect has a microbial active ingredient. So it doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. Yeah, but it's really simple. Just use a liquid product and pour it around the plant's roots, and that's it.
So two things I want to, stemming from what you have already talked about, Sally and Katie and Scott, are the two issues that we are facing, and in this county specifically, and how they're working, how they're working against us. So the two things I want to talk about, one are the new developments in this area, and the practice of kind of scraping off all that topsoil, and how important it's going to be to inoculate, to feed the soil, because of that issue, and what people who are in new developments need to keep in mind when they're planting. And also the fertilizer ban that takes place in the summertime, which some people are still unaware of. And I'm curious to know, have we been seeing positive effects from the ban? So starting with the topsoil issue, and anybody who is excited to tackle this, please jump on in.
Well, I would like to add something quickly that has to do with everything we've been talking about. Your question just now, and also back to the whole fertilizer thing, is I do want to point out to everybody that if you are on reclaimed water, there's no need to fertilize. We just did a several-year-long groundwater study with Brevard County, and a lot of the data supports the fact that reclaimed water is just loaded with nutrients. So there is absolutely no reason to waste money on fertilizing your yard when there's going to be no net benefit, because all the nutrients it needs, it's already getting from reclaimed water. So another important point for everybody is just to be aware of your property and where your water comes from, if you are irrigating, because if you're irrigating and you have reclaimed water, there's definitely no need to be fertilizing. And as far as the fertilizer ban, I believe that IFAS was just contracted to do a study on whether there's been quantified benefits or not. So Sally might be able to answer that one.
Yeah, I haven't seen any results from that. I remember we live right off the river road in Cocoa. And so, we always go down to a little park at the end of our road. And I know at the beginning of this year, the river looked fantastic, but that was because we were having a prolonged dry spell. And then it seemed like once we started to get all the rain, and we had all the stormwater runoff, it went a weird looking green. But I am thrilled because we haven't had a fish kill. And I figure now, we're getting cooler. It's not going to be as hot. So I think we've dodged a bullet, which is great. But it still seems like as long as we're, going to be using a lot of synthetic fertilizer, and yeah, especially if they have reclaimed water, then they really don't need to use it. One other thing though, for people who live in an HOA where they have the ponds, they call them lakes, but they're wet retention ponds. We get the nutrients into that water and they just stay there unless they use a floating BMAP or something like that, which, the plants can float in the middle and grow off of. That would be a good way to get the nutrients out of there. But yeah, I'm not necessarily expecting a lot of results because I don't think we've really started doing enough different stuff.
Hey, Liz, I'll address the land development question, but I think there's a bunch of great questions people just typed up.
There are, and I am definitely going to save the last 10 minutes for all of these questions. Let's chat about the land development issue, because a lot of people don't know about that and how important it is to understand that when being successful with planting. And then we'll jump into the questions in the chat.
Yeah, and I have no problem addressing land development because actually I work as an environmental consultant also, so I deal with a lot of land development. And I know. Now, as for removal of topsoil, that doesn't always happen. It just depends on what type of construction is going. And then, of course, they have to replace that. And with the FDP regulations, St. Johns River Water Management regulations, Army Corps of Engineer regulations, there's a lot of things that go into play on how land development is created, especially with stormwater runoff. The problem is like if you build an individual home, you don't have to do any stormwater control. But if it's a development, you have to do stormwater control. So if you have a big property, a bunch of property, and each person is putting up their individual house, eventually it looks like a big development, but there's no stormwater control for that location. But when they do a planned development, they actually have to maintain that. They cannot allow runoff to go into areas. So there's control on that. But again, then you have to look at the other side of it, is that, you know, we're losing permeable water or permeable ground. There's a lot of, you know, and then there's more people coming in, and that also puts an impact on the environment. There's the other aspect to this also, is that anytime somebody wants to develop, especially if they're going to impact any wetland areas, they have to buy either mitigation credits, which then puts land that is pristine wetlands into perpetuity of protection, or they have to enhance the existing property. So it's a strange balance. I know a lot of people look at development as bad, and so do I. I mean, I don't want all these areas to be concrete jungle, but there are a lot of regulations that prevent a lot of the things that used to happen in the past. But again, going back to it, actually a single family house is more damaging in some ways to an environment just from a stormwater control aspect, because you don't have to have stormwater control for a single house. That's the kind of the crazy part about it. I always wondered that. So if you're in an area and people are selling individual lots, everybody's putting their own house, but it's not a development, you know, you don't get the stormwater control that you really need. So it's a bunch of rules and regulations, kind of how that bounces back and forth.
And there is, if anybody out there is interested in development and kind of best management practices from the environmental standpoint, low impact development is kind of an up and coming thing that hopefully more developers and more governments will start adopting and pushing and regulating for these low impact development strategies that are outlined, that basically, you know, the end goal is to reduce stormwater as much as possible. And there are a lot of different techniques within low impact development, the umbrella, and shoreline restoration and mangroves and living shorelines are part of that, which is a big thing that I am focusing on at MRC. So low impact development would be something I would recommend for anybody to research if they're interested in the development aspect.
And Katie, to go along with what you're saying, a lot of developers I talk to actually do practice that, because they find from a sales standpoint,
Sure.
the less area they impact, people like that. They like more green areas. And so they really try to minimize their footprint, maximize their green area, which actually increases their profitability, surprisingly.
Thank you. I am going to dive into the chat so that some of the folks who are participating can get their questions answered. Jan asks, would it be wise to inoculate mulch and compost that is placed around my plants? And Sally, it looks like you answered in the chat, but if you could also just answer for everyone else, that would be terrific.
Sure. So the biggest thing that the microbes need are living plant roots. So the more plants we have growing, the bit more diverse the microbes can be. So I wouldn't bother doing the mulch or even the compost, but just do around the plants that are growing there. That's why I tend to like less mulch now and more variety of plants. Oh, and this reminds me, Liz, you were talking about, or someone, I don't know, maybe it was Scott, talking about growing edibles in your landscape. Bree Arthur has a really neat book called Foodscape Revolution. And so she talks about, you know, incorporating different edibles in your landscape, and it's real easy to do. So, but yeah, so I wouldn't bother inoculating your mulch or compost, just do the plants that are growing there. And that would be great.
Bree Arthur is fascinating, and her book is wonderful. She was at Rockledge Gardens last year. She gave a talk about her book and did a book signing. So yes, I definitely highly recommend reading all about her tips for putting food in your landscape. And definitely come visit our food forest over at Rockledge Gardens to kind of get an example of what a miniature food forest could look like, and how you don't really need a lot of space to grow your own food. It's pretty cool.
Where is it?
What's that?
Where is the food forest?
It is on the it's on across the sidewalk, the south of our annuals and perennials area. So we've got figs and papaya and pineapples and edible passion fruit, a peach tree, I believe, a bunch of some mangoes, some avocados, watermelons. So it's a lot of fun. The staff typically shares whatever we get out of the food forest. Okay, so moving on to Donna's question. Hi, Donna. Is it as harmful to water from a deep well?
That would depend on the salt content. And it can be salty depending upon where it is. So I don't know. Liz, do you guys still test water? We do at our office. I don't know if you guys still test it.
Yep. Yep. You can bring a water sample and we'll test it at Rockledge Gardens for you. Absolutely. And there's no charge for that. Yeah. So come see us, Donna. Okay, from Stephanie, we live on a canal with excellent swale and berm, but the swale is damp most of the time, and I'm tired of tiptoeing across the damp swale to get to the berm to hand weed the St. Augustine. It's time for a change. Can you suggest resources for lagoon-friendly, Florida-friendly landscape design that is specific to water's edge?
Bartina.
Mangroves.
Yeah, of course, my brain goes right to, would it be a good site for mangrove? So it's really hard to tell without like having like a site visit or pictures of the site or, what it exactly looks like. But if you're wanting to plant mangroves, you're basically looking for a natural sloping shoreline. So if you have a rock revetment or if you have a vertical seawall, both of those unfortunately make it really difficult to get mangroves to establish. But if you do have a natural slope, you could be a good candidate for mangroves. And like Scott mentioned, Spartina works together with mangroves too. It's a really great shoreline stabilization plant. But if you're looking for a resource to look at more information about the water's edge, I would go to FloridaLivingShorelines.com. It's a great resource for living shorelines. And unfortunately, again, if you have a vertical seawall, it might be difficult to adopt living shoreline methods, but there are, every site and every shoreline is different. So it kind of just all depends.
Just a note, a little shameless plug while we are on the topic of mangroves. Rockledge Gardens is working with MRC to sell mangroves. They did a mangrove adoption event at Rockledge Gardens several weeks ago. And at that time, we also brought in some mangroves that are for sale. So if your site is a good area for mangroves, we do have them available. We have partnered with MRC as well to create an information sheet that's right there that you can take with you to increase chances of success with the mangroves, and a lot of information about why they are so important to our sustainability here in Brevard. Yeah. Thank you, Stephanie. Actually, while we're still on that topic, I would love to hear from you, Katie, about exactly why mangroves. Why is it important to plant them? What are some of the challenges, and what are the rewards?
Sure. I'm actively filtering just because I could probably talk for hours on this. But so the why question for mangroves, we've destroyed a lot of our mangroves historically in Florida. In our area, they weren't necessarily pulled out, but they were impounded. But regardless, we've altered our shorelines drastically by removing what naturally, the natural native species that would be on the shoreline that would offer nature's benefits, the protection of living in a really harsh, swampy state, where we get hit with hurricanes and a lot of rain, and we're battling, water in our state kind of all the time. And mangroves offer that natural solution that would have been there naturally had we not altered, the land to allow us to live here. But now, we have the opportunity, now that we've learned, kind of what we've done by removing a lot of them. We've removed protection for ourselves. So they protect our shorelines, make our shorelines more resilient. They provide a lot of buffer, basically a vegetated buffer between the water and the land. And no other species really can do that, because mangroves are kind of the super plant, that's able to exist in such a harsh area where other plants, other trees can't live. They live in a wide swing of salinity. They live in a really windy spot. They just live in this super harsh spot right on the water's edge that offers really the only vegetated protection that we could have from the elements. So there's, of course, that kind of natural armoring benefit that they offer, but then they also offer benefits from reducing our impacts. So there's this benefit from the ocean to the land, and then there's also a benefit from the land to the ocean. They're kind of the last line of defense for our nutrients that are running off the land and into the water. They do absorb some of those nutrients and really help kind of restore that balance, that imbalance that we've created with too many nutrients flowing in from stormwater. And of course, there's also the ecosystem benefits, just with the wildlife habitat that they support. So I mean, and the benefits could go on and on. There are many benefits. So one thing at MRC that we do is we run a mangrove nursery where we grow all 3 species. And we do have a kind of a capacity of how many plants we can care for. So one way that we kind of enlist the public in helping us get these plants out and available for any restoration projects, from small, meaning like a small private house that just, wants to add some mangroves to their property, all the way up to larger scale restoration projects that are government funded. So we can provide those plants. We're sending some to the Bahamas soon, which is pretty exciting. So our plants are going all over the place, and we rely on the support of our local community to really help us with our restoration and our nursery operations, both from maintenance, pulling weeds, to actually having plants at home. I have satellite nursery facilities in people's backyards with people that are just just really want to jump in and turn their backyard into a little nursery of their own for mangrove. So we, there's all kinds of levels of participation in our mangrove program, but I think it's certainly just a reflection of the community that that people really do understand that mangroves are just such a critical part of restoring our shorelines.
Awesome. We are coming to the end of our hour. We have one more question from Craig, and then I'd love to hear from each of you about where we can go to learn more. So Craig says, how can I get bia mats for stormwater ponds? I don't know what bia mats are, so I'm about to learn something. I'm excited.
So if you Google bee mats, I think the company, it's maybe north of us, but they basically have a floating system where you grow the plants and then you have to, harvest them after they've grown, but they actually will go ahead and use up the nutrients so that by the time, especially in all of our areas, they eventually, outflow into the IRL. So it's really great, especially like Sun Tree, all these places. But yeah, just do a Google search for bee mats, BEEMATS, and you'll find the company. And if you can't, you can email me and I'll find it.
Excellent. So I want to touch on one thing that Caity said earlier in closing, when you were talking about the lagoon loyal resource. And one of the things you said is there are lots of things that people can do and ways that people can help. I think that those of us who really care about making a more beautiful world and who see the seriousness of the situation that we're in, sometimes it can feel overwhelming, feeling like you have to do all of the things all of the time. And so sometimes it can feel overwhelming, and then it's just like, okay, well, I'm not going to do any of the things any of the time. But I think what I took from what you said, Caity, is that there are so many options, and doing one of them, two of them, three of them is so much better than not doing any of them. So finding the ways that you specifically can help, and what resonates with you and what really does fit into your life at this time is so important. What is the one thing that you can do? So I would challenge the participants who have joined us. Thank you, by the way, for your donations. Those are going to be split between these three awesome organizations. Thank you for that. But I would challenge each of you to also, after you get off this this webinar, go and find the one thing that you can do, that you can start today, and start telling your friends about it as well. So that's my parting challenge. Just a minute from each of you before we close. I'd love to hear where we can get more information, where we can find that one thing more that we can do. Scott, you want to start?
Sure. Just from us from Eastern Florida State College, I mean, you can always take courses with us, and I'd like to promote our program. But I will be honest with you, some of the best resources actually come from Sally's office.
Yeah, absolutely. Sally.
Just email me if you have questions or whatever. I do the 2 classes in the spring and such. That would be the other option, but otherwise email's fine. Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah,
So Sally and Scott have both put their email addresses into the chat. So they're welcoming you to reach out for further information. So that's awesome. Thank you. And then Caity just did as well. So Caity, we'll end with you.
Sure. Yeah. I really enjoyed, well, this in general. Thank you for hosting it. It definitely is, you know, talking about the ways that we can all make an impact. You know, you have an impact at Rockledge Gardens, and I appreciate you reaching out to the organizations to kind of spread the word, because it's definitely about people kind of raising awareness and talking to their friends within the community to really raise awareness of issues that many people don't even realize. You know, they see the lagoons maybe a color that's off, you know, it's like pea soup green, and they're like, you know, what the heck, you know, like people don't even realize that year round, just because it's pea soup green 1 or 2 months out of the year doesn't mean that the rest of the year it's in good health. Like, it's really not. It's, you know, we're struggling here to, you know, reverse a lot of damage that's been done over several decades, and it's up to every individual, even though it's overwhelming at times. Trust me, I know. You know, but I think that the Lagoon Loyal program is a really great resource. I encourage everybody to reach out to that, because it does exactly that. It kind of takes away the responsibility of you to figure out what you should do. Like, it tells you what you should do, and then offers incentives for doing those things. So it does kind of like reduce that overwhelming feeling of like, which, you know, what direction do I start in? You know, it's like, just kind of helps you focus your attention on things that you can do to make a difference. And then of course, sharing that information with your peers. I just think that it's more powerful than people realize.
Thank you so much, Scott, Sally, Caity. I'm so grateful that you were here with me today. I'm so grateful that you're in our community. Please know that we at Rockledge Gardens want to do absolutely everything that we can to continue to make this such a beautiful place to live. And we are so grateful for your knowledge and for sharing this with us. We have recorded this session, and we will be making it available publicly, so that more people who weren't able to tune in live today will be able to learn this valuable information and reach out to these incredible organizations for next steps and find that one thing. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you. This is great.
Thank you.
It was a good time. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.